Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Ella and I'm delighted to be joined by Rory Neary, CPS United Kingdom, who'll be talking to you today about tips, tricks and game changers for citizen developers in Power Automate and Canvas Power Apps. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC22. Check out the Resource Centre. The Resource Centre is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars and how-to videos. Join us online the 12th to 16th of September for Microsoft Teams Week. This is a free online week of expert content through webinars, blogs, ebooks and more. Check out the webinar lineup at sharepointeurope.com/your guide to Microsoft Teams. The ESPC 22 Community Awards deadline is fast approaching. Submit your entry before September 14th to be with a chance of being crowned the best in Europe. These awards are judged by an independent judging panel. If you're interested in attending ESPC 22 later this year, November to December, make sure to get your early bird tickets before it's too late. Early bird sale is ending in September. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a question and answers session. Type any questions you may have into the question window. The webinar will be recorded and you'll be notified by email when it is available. Now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter this morning, Rory Neary.
Hello everyone, can you hear me fine?
I can hear you anyway, no comments so far.
Lovely. I'm just going to start sharing my screen to get us started. So I've got, sorry, I've just got something going there. So can you see my screen at all so far?
Yeah, I can see the Power Platform Learn now your LinkedIn.
Lovely, thank you. Well, welcome everyone to this session. It's kind of an unusual session. It is tips, tricks and game changers for Power Automate and Power Apps. So it's a bit long-winded in terms of the name of the session, but we'll kind of get into where this session came from very shortly. So my name is Rory Neary. I'm a Power Platform Solution Architect. I wasn't always a Power Platform Solution Architect. 5 or 6 years ago, I was working as an accountant, and I got to the point with the accountancy where it just wasn't doing the same thing for me. So I was fortunate enough to be able to leverage my Excel Power Query skills to mean that I could then start working with Power BI, and then moved from working with Power BI out into the rest of the Power Platform. During this time, I created a YouTube channel, so put together lots of videos there, and I've also, I got to become an MVP, which is a bit of a byproduct of just essentially wanting to share your knowledge with other people. By all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always kind of letting people know little new bits of knowledge, and we might get to see some of that later on. I work at CPS, Corporate Project Solutions, as a Power Platform developer. I've got some wonderful colleagues and we have great customers. So if you need any sort of resourcing from a Power Platform perspective, do contact me, do contact us. It is a great organization. I'm super happy to be working with them. A lot of where my work takes place or has taken place has been on a set of courses that I put together in respect of the Power Platform. So my main course is the PowerFX Canvas Apps from Zero to Hero. It's over 300 lessons, focused predominantly on Canvas apps. So when you sort of think, oh, how do you manage to do 300 lessons? Well, with great difficulty, but also you have to think that there's a lot there. There's a lot to learn in Canvas apps, which is why I put the course together. Now, the way in which this session works is that my plan, I've actually created a course for you. Now it's free. What I've done is I've made it free. It's got like a $9.99, but you got like a full discount, and we'll be able to, so you can actually play along with this session if you wish to. I'll just show you that if you, as we run through it, so if you actually take a photo of this QR code or go to here, then all you need to do is to type in the discount Rory Neary, and then you would be able to get full access to the course. So if I go to Power Platform Learn.academy, a slightly different email address URL up here, but you'd go into it, you'd go onto the course, and then you'd enroll on the course. But the thing I just want to point out to you is this bit here, redeem coupon. You just type in Rory Neary, and then when you hit the apply on that, then it would make it 100% discount. Just put your email address in and then select buy, which would mean that you could then play along with this session as we go through it. So the next lesson, they're really tiny lessons. So this is just sort of says, just head to Power Platform Learn.academy and you can get to it there. So there are sort of roughly 6 sections to this presentation. It's going to be quite rapid. There are lots of lessons in them, but they're all actually quite small. And so the intention of this session is not for you to become an expert in anything at the end of the session. There's actually lots of little micro bits of knowledge, things that it took me maybe months or even years to find out. And then once I found out, I thought, oh, I wish I'd known that a long time ago. So the purpose of this session is to kind of show you those things I'd wish I'd known about a lot sooner. So, but the first thing is I'm deeply fascinated by the idea of learning, how we learn when we're a bit older. And that's why I put this course together, because I've been in lots of presentations where you thought, oh, that was interesting, and then you think, oh, but I'm not really sure what they said. So the reason why I've gone for this approach to the presentation is that I want you to be able to relive the experience. You can kind of click on links, all that sort of stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do, the first real lesson we're going to do is on accelerated learning. So my first point on accelerated learning is get your own Microsoft tenant, your own personal Microsoft tenant, because without that, you can't then build solutions for yourself. Now, so that's the second point. So building solutions for yourself is really important. So this is a little solution I have here. It's, you know, from a UI point of view, it's absolutely terrible, but actually it's kind of cool. So I've got some neat little things that I can do with this. I can search for things. I have this little reference TIDKY. It just means things I don't know yet. And it means that I can then research them later on because I can filter on it. So where this app started was I just was desperate to record where my knowledge was, and I just threw it together really quickly. But I've developed it a bit since, because I kind of thought, well, do you know what? It'd be really cool to be able to, you know, if I wanted to do social media, I'd be able to do something there. So initially it was going to be a Twitter thing, but then I sort of decided that it would be better if I'm just going to get rid of this, was able to, okay, it's 283 characters head here. Twitter only allows you to do 280 characters, which strictly speaking this isn't, because the URL would take you further on. In fact, this one here, I'm just going to get rid of this link here, and I can now tweet this out and put it onto LinkedIn. So that's what I want to show you, that building solutions for yourself is kind of cool. So if I just do this and hit the tweet, now I could have written this more comprehensively. I can now click launch the tweet, and I can actually go and have a look at the tweet that I just wrote. And bearing in mind that it's quite fun, isn't it? I hope you think it's fun. And this also has a development scenario and a production scenario, so I can really test things out. But it means that anyone can actually see that. You could go and see, I don't know if I can put this into a chat or anything like that, but you would be able to go and see, I can't see the chat here, but you would be able to go and review that tweet if you followed me on Twitter. My handle is Azure Rory. But this point here, build solutions for yourself. So this is my solution. It's important to me, but something else might be important to you. So build solutions for yourself, and record your learning experience. So recording your learning experience is like, I asked people on the web what they do, and most people came back with OneNote. Some people came back with using blogs. I guess other people use things like YouTube in order to record their learning experience. As you can see, I use my Training Notes app to record my learning. Some people use little wikis, and whatever it is you do, record your learning experience, because otherwise you don't have anything to refer back to. As I say, I use an app because that means I can search for things. So remember that we're actually there. So this is actually a tutorial about how to create an app, a learning app. So that's quite cool. And the next point is join the community. So the fact you're here already means that you get that whole community thing. And look, hopefully as time goes on, there will be more in-person events. So get yourself out to an in-person event, because there's nothing like being able to talk to people. And let's be honest, I'm talking to myself at the moment. So so that just gives you an idea of what a challenge this whole thing can be. I'm just going to have a little look at the chat here, because I've just worked out where it is. Look, by all means, people, I'm talking to myself in a room here. Just make sure you pop things in the chat, because it keeps me sane. So yeah, join the community. That's really important. And there's a little link there for you to get to some of the Power Platform communities here. Get social. So tell people about things, tell people about what you're struggling with, and you would be amazed about how much of a response that you can get. And it'd be quite interesting to see actually if there's a response to the tweet that I've sent out already. Let's have a do that. It's good fun. Let's see if I've got any retweets maybe. So not much going on that at the moment. It's only out a few minutes, and let's be honest, everyone should be at work at this point in time. Oh, one like. Follow the very best blogs and YouTube content. Now, in this course, people are actually allowed to add in their own comments. So people have put in what they think are good places to go to in terms of content that's out there. So yeah, so if you're on the course, go in there, put your comments in. It's well received. Yeah, so just find those for the best content. The next one is go on a structured course. There's lots of places for courses. Microsoft Learn is pretty good. It's at quite a high level, so you may but it's quite, he may not necessarily find it can work, but certainly when I put together the Power Apps course, I knew I needed something that was pretty massive in order to kind of get across all the things I wanted to tell people about. Teach others. Some fun quotes. Well, a fun quote here: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So that process of explaining to people about how things work, how things that you understand work, is an important part of your own personal learning experience. And I went across to, I went onto the NIST, and they sort of indicated that sort of that pyramid of learning. Initially you learn from lecture, and then you learn from reading, and then you might learn from audio visual, and then maybe you see a demonstration, maybe you discuss it with people. That's the community bit of it, practice doing things. And then the final stage in the learning is that teaching others element. Do not overlook it. I think a lot of people probably do. So, and that could be team members, whatever it might be. Just a reminder of the course URL, just pop that one in there from a presentation point of view. So jump yourself in there. And there is a quiz at the end of this. I'd forgotten I'd done this, but I'm actually going to answer the questions. I'm just going to jump onto it. I can't remember what they are. Start the quiz now. Start. Why is it a good idea to get your own Microsoft tenant? Because it helps Microsoft to make more money, etc., etc. And I sort of said, well, do you know what? But I've said it already, because it's easier to experiment in your own tenant. You get to keep the products you create and then continue, etc., etc., etc. So we're not going to do the quiz now. What we are going to do is we're going to take a look at the Power Apps learning points. And the first place we're going to start is with Gestalt Principles. Now, Gestalt Principles would, on the face of it, seem like an odd, well, has anyone heard of this Gestalt Principles? Ella, can you hear me okay there? I'll just do a quick check that everyone's all fab. Ella, have you heard of Gestalt Principles?
No, I'm afraid not.
Afraid not. But here's the thing: Gestalt Principles are all about how we understand the objects, how we perceive objects. And speaking of objects, I just need to make sure that I'm actually got my computer on charge, because I perceive that it wasn't on charge. So yeah, how do we perceive objects? How do we differentiate the importance of objects relative to each other? Think about it. Think about all the apps you use. How often do you read the instruction manual for the apps you use? You don't. And the reason for that is because of this idea of Gestalt Principles. So this is quite a good post. It's like a really cool post on Gestalt Principles. So Gestalt Principles came out around about the 1910, 1920s. It's a branch of psychology, but actually it is how we perceive objects. And that's really important in terms of, you look at these dots on the screen here, you actually think that these dots here, the 6 dots, are different to the 4 dots. So that is proximity, how close these things are to each other. So James and Stuart are separate to each other, but james@stuart.connect is one thing. Similarity. So we actually think about the objects that look similar as being the same as each other. So these two indicate they're actually similar to each other. In fact, we've kind of got the email and the password are both in gray, which sort of indicates they may be data entry things. The login is a button. It's in a different color, so we think about them differently. Common region, really important. So that's essentially putting borders around things. So you can see these working here. So Gestalt Principles. I'm not going to go into all of them now, but my point is that every app that you have ever seen and you've ever built will use Gestalt Principles. And even when you don't know you're using them, you are using them. So, and this is just a little idea of Gestalt Principles here. You can see in a normal Power App, you can see you've got sort order. You could argue that job status isn't close enough to the not started in progress to follow it, because you actually might think it relates to the one with duration and so on. So maybe that's a mistake, but you actually know that the show urgent jobs, the tick, these relate to each other. So these are really important things. I've just gone onto the Microsoft website here and just indicated Gestalt Principles in operation here. So I'm going to jump ahead because I'm kind of conscious of time, but Gestalt Principles do have a relevance to later on when we start to think about things like padding. Now, padding is just a way that we use to just to create a little border around our objects. So if you're in Power Apps, that is what that padding helps you to do. I'm not going to go into the technical bits of it, but when you come across it, don't overlook it too much. And also, if you think about icons, sometimes we want them smaller, we want the hitbox size to be bigger. And if you use padding, then the image gets smaller, but the size of the box stays the same. Naming conventions. So this is, from a development point of view, it's probably one of the most important things that you can get good at. So by default, labels will be and drop downs and galleries and all these sorts of things will be named in a very specific way. So it'll be like gallery 1, or it'll be button 1, then button 1_1, etc., etc. But there are coding principles that we should observe, because if we don't, then as a community and as a collective, nobody will ever understand each other's apps, because they've had their objects named in unusual ways. And so the Microsoft documentation, this was put together in 2018 and is as relevant now as it was then. Have I moved away? I have. Yeah. So what you do is you jump into there, download the white paper, and you're good to go at that point in time. Naming conventions are really important when you're working in teams. You just need to observe them. Right, apologies. So now the self property is quite just interesting. So you can reference elements of your own object. So you can look at the color of the object, you can look at the fill of the object, you can look at it in all sorts of different ways. So you could make the fill of the object the same, or the border of the object the same as the color of the text, say. That would be one way of doing it. And in this case, in order to actually put an object into the middle of the screen, what I did was I referenced the width of the property and divided by 2 in order to tell it what the X value of that property was. So it's quite a cool thing. If you don't know it's there, it can be, it's a bit of a shame, really. And what you can also see is I'm now looking at parent properties. So in this case, I'm actually looking at the parent width in order to actually decide what the X value is. And so that's my next lesson, is just looking at parent properties. It's to say you can use them in different ways. Quite often you'll look at, it could be looking at a container, it could be something within in a form. So you could look at the display mode of within a form, and you could reference the overall form's display mode, whether it's in edit, etc., etc. So parent properties, really important thing to be able to do. Now the next one I avoided for a very, very long time, and that is the patch function. Now and part of the reason why I avoided it was because I didn't understand how to read JSON, and we will come on to that later on. But the patch allows you to do some very interesting things. So patch is like when you create a form, and so if you look at this is a boring form. So if I look at this and if I hit a plus, I get let's be honest, it's a boring form. The everything is in kind of blocky areas, and it's kind of hard to get everything on the screen. It's not a very nice user experience. But with patch, you can have a different relationship with your items. Now, I'll just check if this is this a, yeah, I think this is, yeah, this is more like, yeah, this is definitely a patch statement that we use to create this. So that means I can have within a single button the ability to I've got the ability to actually create an item here. So find job category, test job, make sure it's urgent, test 1, 2, 3, and I can click create on that. So with a single button, then I've actually created something. So if I just go to review jobs, so I should find that my test job will have appeared. There's my test job. But here we go. Here's another thing now. If I click on urgent, I'm actually pretty sure I put a patch statement in there to then send the data to the database for the data to change. But that means that I don't use a form. So if I click on urgent, it's just sent the information and it's actually updated the data. So this was a different way of working with it. I could have sent myself out to another screen to edit it, but I just didn't want to. So patch is really important from that perspective. And in order to be able to patch things, you need to be able to understand JSON data structures, which we will come on to a bit later. But what you can see here is that if you were using Power Automate, a JSON structure would look a bit like this. But in Power Apps, you would find that it would look a bit like this. So you can see that it doesn't have the quotes around it and so on. So it's not hugely difficult. It's pretty straightforward to use. And to be fair, I've actually done a very simple patch statement here. But if you actually jump through to this area here, you can see more details on how to use the patch function. So display mode. So as I say, this is an overall thing here where we're looking at lots of different things, but display mode is my next lesson. And display mode is really important because it defines whether or not people can interact with an object. So if you look at this training notes thing here, I'm going to put test 1, 2, 3, notes, test 1, 2, 3, BBC. In fact, I know what this is looking for, .co.uk, and actually what it's looking for is it's saying you need to always fill in the tech product. So if I remove that, what you can see is it's grayed out, and that's because the display mode is in display mode .disabled. And it means that I don't put in invalid data because I want to be able to actually put invalid data. So you actually see if I click in Dataverse, then I can actually hover on this correctly and then use that. So display mode is really important because it stops people entering bad data. Variables. There are kind of two types of variables. So global variables or context variables. And they can do different things. They hold data whilst you're using the app. And the difference between global variables and context variables is, number one, how they're written, and number two, that context variables can exist on more than one screen in a different state on each of those screens. So it could be to do with the visibility of something, whatever it might be. But that's kind of interesting to be able to use that. So next lesson is on start. Looking at the time, we're looking good for time. On start. Now the on start is interesting because that is where we can establish certain things. It could be theming within the app, but it actually runs kind of before the app opens. So the trick is probably not to put so much into your on start statement because that will slow down the loading time for your app. Potentially better for you to actually get them into the app and then have a loading screen within the app. But so just be careful on how you use the on start property. And there is a link to a post by Greg Lindhorst, who's like a really, I'm just going to jump up the size here. Greg Lindhorst on where the platform is going with this. So on start will become less of a thing, and also the way in which we write variables will also change over time. Start screen, there's a start screen. So as long as you know there's a start screen, then what we used to have is it just used to start on the first screen that was in the list. Now we've got the ability to actually define what the start screen is, and that's part of Microsoft's journey to creating a better experience for us and not having lots of weird logic inside the on start. So collections may not be the thing that you initially start creating, but actually if you want an in-memory table, collections are your way to go. So it might be that you at some point go and get data from the data source, you then store it in a collection, because that means that your drop down doesn't have to refer to the data source every time it sort of gets used. And it could be that that sort of drop down might get used on multiple pages within your app, so you might make it less efficient if you don't use collections. Yeah, I haven't actually indicated very much about how you use them. Just bear in mind that that is something that you would use there. So I'm going to move directly on from there though, because I'm conscious of time. Filtering is like, if you can't filter in your apps, like most apps have data needs to be filtered. So therefore, if you cannot have a command of filtering, then you will most likely be unsuccessful with building apps, sadly. And so within this is a very brief introduction to filtering, just to give you an idea of maybe the importance of it and so on. You can learn more about it in the Zero to Hero course, but you can also go on to the Microsoft documentation to find out a bit more on filtering. My point here is though, if you can't filter, then it will be difficult for you to be successful with building your Power Apps. Now the next one is I don't know, it's probably one of the most fun ones, in that it's called param. Now param is quite is an unusual sounding thing, but essentially within the URL that you create, you can indicate a parameter. Now in this URL here, you've got the URL here, and then just after the question mark, you've got launch screen, that is the parameter, equals third screen. So what that means is that if I copy that and paste it in here, I'm going to end up on my third screen. And the reason for that is that within my app, you can actually see here the start screen is switch, param, launch screen. So if it says first screen, screen 1, second screen, screen 2, third screen, screen 3, that's just essentially how it works. And what it means is that you can potentially put it onto first screen. So it's going to launch, but it's going to launch on the first screen. Now, I've just given you a really simple indication of how you might use it, but more likely that you'd use it if you had, for example, a Power BI report, which actually then wanted to direct people to a specific record within a Power App. That would be pretty straightforward with this. You would then launch them A, to the correct screen, and B, to the and B, so that the record that's effectively initialized is on the correct record. Now, the next thing on this is the quiz. Now, if I'm running a quiz at the moment, and if you pass the quiz, then you get put in the pot for a $50 Amazon voucher. So I'm just gonna, in fact, the closing date is today. It's just a straightforward quiz, and essentially if you've watched this presentation, then you know all the answers to things. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to challenge you guys I'll do the why might you use padding in your you've got 4 options, and I want someone to try and use the chat to give me the answer here. Why might you use padding? A, to correctly name your objects. B, to ensure that filters are correctly applied. C, to create a delay between when a button is pressed and when it takes effect. And C, to create a border effect or increase the hitbox size for an icon. Does anyone know the answer to that? out of the 26 people that we've got on this. Anyone able to jump on the chat and do that?
We have 2 answers coming in, and I'll tell you what they are. Yeah.
I can't see the answers.
Maybe it's just for me. They come up in the questions area. So, yeah,
So
we have
got?
Pascal voted for D, and we got Karina who voted for D as well.
This is very good. Well listened, everyone. I don't know what I just I don't know what happened then. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Yeah, so well done. So you've got one, I've just given you one of the answers to the question, but it is kind of fun. It's just on the questions that we've been through already, but I'm not going to go through that because I've got more stuff to talk to you about. And the thing I am going to talk to you about is JSON. Now, JSON is really, really important. It's really important within the Power Platform. And in terms of, so it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a text-based format that is used to store and transfer data. So if you look at this syntax here, name, John, age 22, gender, male, that is a JSON structure. It may not feel like a JSON structure. In fact, it doesn't look perfect because there's a funny little comma at the end, so that doesn't look right to me. But this one is a different JSON structure. So, and this next lesson here is on formatting and reading JSON, because that's really important. So how do we actually read JSON? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to head across to Code Beautify, and I'm going to throw in some JSON. So what we can see in here is that we have lots of things within here. So we have an array, rather something that's called an array, and it's got at position 0, you've got a 1, at position 1, you've got 2, 3, and we're going to see a little bit of this later on. This isn't the only time that we're going to see this, but you can see that this, you know, we've got an object that contains different things. Here you've got a color, lots of different cool things here. I don't even know how they managed to get the gold thing in there. That's very clever. So this is, I always use Code Beautify when I want to understand the nature of an object that I've created. And if you jump back here, I'm going to go onto Code Beautify and just whiz this across here. What I've done is I've got a bunch of text here. It looks so complicated. It's actually just from a SharePoint list. I'll put close on that, and if I paste that in there, you can actually see it's kind of straightforward. You know, there are quite a few objects within there, but actually it's not very complex. It's actually 10 cities from there's 10 cities there, because it starts at 0. The very first city is Aberdeen, and it's not a capital. We know different things about it, but this becomes relevant later on when we start to look at Power Automate. So this is really key for our understanding, and it is these structures are relevant when we use them in as I say, Power Automate, and also in Power Apps. So I've not even gone into much detail on using them in Power Automate. We have actually got a whole lesson on that, and yeah, so we'll see how to use that later on. And in Power Apps, it's similar but not the same. So remember that the structure is this. We tend to not have the double quotes around the first field that we have. So there is complexity here, but once you kind of start to get your head around JSON structures, then you're good to go. So the next thing here is around Power Automate. So I'm going to talk about specifically, for me, Gamechangers on Power Automate. Now there aren't that many of them, but that's okay, because I think these are the game changers. So in terms of playing with this, what I've done for you is I've got a big download and a small download, and this is the small download. It's Marvel characters. You can click on there, just a bunch of Marvel characters. You can download it, click it in there, and then if you want to, you can then upload it to a SharePoint site. So essentially, it's really easy to do this. So let me see if I can show you. No, my screens are going a little bit interesting, so jump onto this. It's really easy to create a SharePoint list with data inside it, which is why I've given it to you. But essentially, I'm not going to actually go through the full process. But if I was to go onto here, and I was actually to go onto here, and then go onto export, and then go export data, export table to a SharePoint list, you'd hit the drop down, you'd kind of tell it what the address was. I could call the list Marvel 4 because I've got a couple of lists there already. Click next, and then finish. It's now going to create a list for me, and I can jump into that list, and I could potentially interrogate the list in order to find out data in a JSON format. And we're going to see a little bit of that shortly. So there we are. So you've got a couple of downloads. The cities one is a little bit more, well, it's just more detailed. There's 5,000 cities on there, so you might want a little bit more data to have a little play around with. And then the first thing that I want to talk to you about, there's only a few things on here that I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about compose. I want to talk to you about replacing dynamic data with expressions and using question mark for JSON levels, and then maybe getting the first item. Now, in terms of how we do this, I've created a flow already. And what the flow does is the flow goes off to my, it's just a manually triggered flow. There is an input. I'm not sure if I actually use the input anymore. Not anymore because I took it out. So this will just return a bunch of items. So this is the first compose statement. So what I want to show you is I'm going to run the flow. So test that manually. It's going to ask me for a character test 1, 2, 3. So it's not actually going to do anything at all. But I just want to show you this flow running, and then show that this is the dynamic expression. So what you can see is it's returning data to us. So if I actually do Control A and then jump onto here and then go onto my code beautify and then do Control V on it, what we can actually see in here is that we have within here we've got 20 records. The very first record is Black Widow. I can say that she's on the goodies side, and that I've just guessed that her age has been 39, and hopefully I'm not giving it away, but alive is false, so she's not alive anymore, I'm afraid. Sorry to drop that one on you. So this is me using Power Automate. I've just gone into Code Beautify and I've done this. So the next thing to do is to maybe think about, in fact, the first one is Thanos. The next thing to think about is how do we actually drill into that using Power Automate. So I'm going to jump on this and I'm going to go on to here, go on to edit, and then what I want to do is I want to show you on this compose statement here. What I want to do is I'm going to come off there. I'm now going to select all this, Control C. I don't know if copy works. I want to try that. Go onto expression, jump on there, back onto expression, and then Control V. And then you end up with this funny, at curly brackets, body, etc., etc. So if we basically delete this and we delete this and go OK, then it's the same thing. So if I click save and then I test it, it's going to do the same thing as before. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to click on the test. So once it's finished saving, just let it get to the end of that. Pregnant pause. Well, whilst it's doing that, I'm going to show you a little bit. Oh, it's saved now. So I'm going to click test on there, click manually, OK, test, and then run flow. And then click done, because the point about this thing here is I just want to demonstrate that actually in this second compose statement, it does the same thing. It's the same thing. So I'm just saying an expression, it's the same as a dynamic statement. Now, what we can do here, the next bit here is like really, really important, because we're now going into the levels within this. So if you actually look at this thing here, what we can do is we can now, what we're trying to do is we kind of drill into this. So what if we wanted to know the title Thanos for the very first record? What if we wanted to know that? You know, how would we do that? And in actual fact, it's not so difficult, because all we would do, excuse me, I'm on the wrong thing. On this statement here, I'm just going to go onto here and pop it on Notepad. Good. Pop that in there, and then now I'm just going to pop in title. And what are we doing here? So body get items filtered, question mark value. Okay, well, hold on. Let's look at this. And I just want to go onto Notepad again. And it's disappeared. There it is. So look at what we've done here, right? This is key to me. Just need to widen this up. Body. Okay, got items filtered. Okay, that's the first thing. Then we're going to jump into value. Then we're going to get the second thing. Well, the second thing is, oops, this one here, which is Spider-Man, and get his age. So if we jump back to this here, and if we were actually to run in, if we went into that and we actually looked at the flow run, we would see that it would return to us 34. So if I go, if I hit the back on this, it's just been a little bit awkward for me. Okay, never mind. Test automatically recently used trigger, pop you in there. What we're seeing is on that second statement is that we can actually see a single value here. And so that means if we were to do if we were to create an email, say, then we know we're only going to get one record. We're not going to get all these funny apply to eaches going on, which you would even get, even if you actually did get items filtered and you actually return one record, it would still be an array of data. Even if you said, oh, limit my filter this to 1, it's still gonna be a structure that's an array. So that wouldn't work. But what we've seen here is that the way in which we jump through the levels is that we go to value, then we go to the second record, and if we wanted the first record, all you need to do is put a 0 in, and then if you would kind of go onto there, and if we would jump onto here, go onto this thing here, and then paste that in there, and then click update, then what that will return for us would be the title. So in this case, I'm expecting, if I hit the test on this, I'm expecting it to return Thanos to me. So I'm just going to click test on that. And it'll be fun if it doesn't work. Oh, flow and flow. Looks like I've, yeah, okay. I probably put a number 1. Oh yeah, filter query equals 1, save, put it into the wrong box. If that was top count, is that where you'd put it? And you click test and then go onto there, test failed, test. And then what we're expecting to see is in this compose first item, it's going to return Thanos because Thanos is in the first record and it is in the title of that. So so that kind of shows us we've gone to compose. So just remind ourselves that this compose action is dead easy to do. All you do is hit a plus, add an action, compose. It's great for looking inside things, compose, and then all you do is you pop it in. There we are, there's my data operation, compose, and then that's how you do it, test in there. Dead easy, but really important and probably much overlooked. So we've been through all of that, and then the final bits of this are really around just these high level things around Dataverse, like, hey, you know, an environment, it's where you keep stuff. You know, it's an environment is this space to store, manage, and share your organization's business data, apps, chatbots, and flows. So the key thing here is it has data, it has a database, it has functionality in the sense of that it's got it has apps, that exists within there, as well as the data. But remember that you can use it for application lifecycle management. So you can have development, test, and production. In fact, you can also use it to ensure that data is geolocated into a region that is acceptable to your organization. So the next thing on Dataverse is to think about solutions, because solutions are the wrappers for your assets. They allow you to see what you've created, because without solutions, it's basically just like putting it in your garage and hoping that you find it when you go looking for it in the future. So really important thing. I'm not going into a big amount of detail here, but just to say, hey, these are important. Environment variables, they're really important because they allow us to assign values to things that are different in one environment to another environment. For example, it could be something around theming, that you actually want your apps to look slightly different in development to what they look like in production, because you're really fed up with when you go into production, not really sure if you're in production because you don't quite know, because there's no real indicators and it looks exactly the same. Can be really debilitating if that is the case. So environment variables can help with that, and they've got different types. So you've got decimal number, JSON, very clever way of doing it. We looked at JSON earlier on, text, yes, no. Data source ones, essentially it is currently limited to SharePoint. However, if you use connection references, which I ought to put into this, then connection references allow you to have different connections depending on the environment that you are in. So they're really important to use. And then finally, going on to model-driven apps, just wanted to make the point, like people don't really know what model-driven apps are. And it's very easy to have a conversation about Power Apps, and one person, I should have a video here. Oh, that's a bit disappointing. So there is, I'll put a video in there later on, and you'll be able to see how to create a basic model-driven app from scratch. It's quite a nice video, but the point is that model-driven apps are built on your Dataverse data. They only work with Dataverse. And they should be considered separately to your Canvas apps, which can connect to lots and lots of different data sources. Now, do bear in mind in the future there will be a convergence of model-driven apps and Canvas apps. That's going on already. So you've got things like Pages, which are essentially Canvas apps. They're kind of single-screen Canvas apps, and people are strongly encouraged to use responsive apps so they change in size, because model-driven apps change in size as well. And then the final thing is around external tools. We've seen Code Beautify. I've also mentioned XRM Toolbox, because XRM Toolbox allows you to work with Dataverse in a way that is frankly extremely helpful. And so I would strongly encourage you to kind of get into using XRM Toolbox if you use Dataverse. Arguably, it should be in the Dataverse bucket there. And that really takes us to the end of the presentation. We've covered a lot of things here. We have covered, we started off looking at accelerated learning and how it is you could become better at learning. I'm going to come off, I don't know if I need to share. Yeah, so accelerated learning, how you could become better at learning. We did lots of points about Power Apps. We jumped all over the place on Power Apps, and I talked to you about Gestalt Principles, which Ella is now an expert on. I then did a little session on JSON, just to kind of introduce the topic of JSON, but also indicate that it's really important. And actually, if you don't really get JSON, you're going to really struggle in the Power Platform. Power Automate, where we started to look at the compose statement and ways in which we can actually drill further into the compose statement. We were kind of using expressions as well, quite cool. And then finally, we just had a little look at Dataverse to see how that worked. that takes me to the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'm just going to come off screen here. Rather, I'll stop sharing and open the platform to any questions that you may have on the things that you might want to learn about in the future. Maybe things I should have put in here that I didn't. I think that would be interesting. I think there must be lots of things there that should be in there. So yeah, open myself to questions.
So someone said you mentioned it would be good to have a good understanding of JSON to better use the Power Platform, and would you recommend any places to kind of get started or get a bit deeper dive into JSON?
Oh wow, that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I think that if I was going to get really into it, like for example, you don't see much of it on Microsoft Learn, and yet you're expected to know about how to use Power Automate, and everything is in JSON. I think where I would start with it, just keep it simple. Just do the little things that I've shown you. Download the Excel spreadsheet, upload it to SharePoint, and then just create the flow that I created in order to use the compose statement, because actually the instructions are all in the lesson. And you'll be a long way towards thinking, so that's how it works. And that will then mean that when you're creating things in the future, then you'll have a better idea of things. Honestly, I've not gone out of my way to, I've just learned it by osmosis. But certainly using the compose statement is brilliant in terms of being able to understand what has been created, then pop it into Code Beautify. It's just a great way of doing it. So, and I also think that working with your own data is really helpful for this sort of thing. So yeah, I will look that up, but there's no obvious things at this point in time for me.
Perfect, thank you. And then the rest are just really compliments. One person as well is very happy about the course and very generous to give it away, they said, and they look forward to exploring it, and it looks awesome.
Yeah, cool. Just remember, I deliberately made today the closing day for the competition. And so by the end of the day, I'll have had all of my entries. I've had maybe 25 or so people have passed it so far. You have to get 100%, but you already know all the answers anyway. So I would thoroughly recommend you do that. And it's a bit of fun. It gives me a chance to, to kind of share the love and so on. But yeah, thank you to everyone for coming on today, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Look at this, 3 minutes to go. I've given you a chance to head off with a little break before your next meeting.
And then just as well from ourselves, thank you, Rory, very much for joining us today and delivering a great webinar, and thanks again as well for sharing the course with our viewers. So it's very kind of you.
Lovely, no trouble at all, and you all have a great day.
Yeah, have a good day too. Thank you. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.